America is a land of the free, home of the brave, as well as the homeland of morbid obesity, 99 genders, and way more school shootings. But it's also the land of innovation, entrepreneurship, and a delusional optimism that is infectious as hell. If America was playing Civilization, it would have already won a cultural victory. And there are few places you could see this more than India, whose English-speaking population constantly has one eye on the Big Apple, Silicon Valley, Hollywood, McDonald's. India and America share much in common. They're diverse, secular, pluralistic democracies. They are political entities functioning at a scale seldom seen ever in history. Along with this crazy amount of diversity, it is a massive achievement. But there are some who suggest that India should become even more like America. Many of these types usually tilt to the left ideologically. But then again, these types usually look to America for intellectual or cultural trends. But what would happen if we actually tried applying American law as well as its culture and values to India? I think many people on the right in India would be upset, but also a surprising number on the left, if not more. But anyways, let's go one by one and see how it goes. The first and most important thing we have to talk about is, of course, tipping. Okay, I had to throw that bait out there. It was too easy, come on. But seriously, if you guys are in America, just tip like 15, 18, 20% if you really want, maybe 25. Just don't go without leaving a tip. It is very true that Indians get a lot of grief for not tipping in America. Come on, it's just a bad look, you know? Remember the phrase, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Okay, but seriously, let's start off with the real number one, free speech. Imagine if anyone in India could say anything all of a sudden. What would happen? This would have a massive impact in India, not just on laws, but also on norms, societal norms. It's very basic to say which laws would be repealed, and I will go through some of them. Stuff like the notoriously stringent sedition law, which various governments have used to shut down extreme anti-government rhetoric, or anti-national rhetoric, as many like to call it. Politicians also use the sedition law as well as similar types of laws to defang critics. We'd naturally see the release of many activists who already are in jail. Keep this point in mind for later. Defamation laws would be significantly diluted in India. A lot of these really frivolous cases that, oh, he said that or she said that, I think a lot of them would be thrown out the window, and it would probably be 2 thumbs up for India. Freedom of assembly would be a bit more free. Now, India is fairly open with this, if not even more than the US in certain cases, and this is where things start to get interesting. This is where we're going to start shifting expectations. And this is going to be a continuous theme as we go through all these different laws and norms and values in society. The truth is that protests like the farmers' protests or Shaheen Bagh would have been forced to move in a violent way if done in the US. That is because these types of protests, as well as similar ones in the past, were blocking vital infrastructure. That type of stuff does not fly in the US. There are also elements of violence associated with these protests. And again, this type of stuff probably wouldn't fly as much as it did in India in America. You might say popular or say approved protests such as BLM or the Gaza protests or even the Vietnam War protests. They also had massive crowds and a lot of assembly across different cities. There was also sometimes violence associated with these protests that turned into riots. But I want you to keep in mind the time of these protests. The Vietnam protests, BLM protests, and Gaza protests, they weren't really blocking vital infrastructure for the extended period of time as protests such as the farmers' protests or Shaheen Bagh protests, or maybe even India against corruption, or other protests in the past as well in India. In this way, the Indian government actually kind of gives a longer rope in terms of freedom of assembly, up to a certain point. If these types of protests were done in America, they would say be blocking vital roads like major entry points into DC or extended periods of violence that happen for months and months and months on end. And this is way more than, say, summer of 2020, which has kind of got a bit notorious. This type of stuff would just not fly in America, I'm telling you. So if India took American values in this case, I think the Indian government would show a bit more bite rather than bark. You tree what I did there? Okay, sorry, I'm almost dad age now, so I had to throw something in like that. This is going to be a general trend we start to see as we go through these laws and as we go through these norms. America usually gives a lot more rope when it comes to verbal dissent, freedom of speech, literally. But America also becomes much more serious when it comes to actual violence and threats to sovereignty, as well as public order. And again, San Francisco is not what all of America is. I know you guys see these crazy videos about some like random fentanyl street corner or these homeless camps, but most cities aren't really like that, and if they are, it's a very small part of the city. Most of America is pretty safe due to a very strong justice system as well as law enforcement, who do sometimes go a little bit overboard, but we'll leave that for another time. So remember those activists I told you about? They would probably get released when it comes to things like freedom of speech or this, now defunct sedition law. Well, the issue is many of these activists are accused of things like secession or trying to overthrow the government, things like Naxalites or certain separatist groups. Now, America has also dealt with secession in the past, and I'm not talking about when some, crazy Antifa people go into Portland or Seattle and take over 4 blocks and, start doing a bunch of drugs in there, put a bunch of barricades and just, have their fun time in there. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm actually referring to when American states democratically elected to secede from the Union of the United States. If you know about American history, you know what I'm talking about. This is the American Civil War. During the war, Abraham Lincoln suspended many freedoms we take for granted here in the US now, as well as various rights, and dealt with the secessionists with an iron hand. While defeated southern states did not need to pay war reparations, the Union conducted a reconstruction that led to significant economic hardship and punitive measures for those former Confederates. In effect, this is kind of like reparations towards the Union government, so they were being pretty savage in this aspect. The violence that occurs in Naxalite regions or areas that have had secessionism in the past would not be tolerated by the American government, nor would those links of these activists be taken so lightly. America has treason laws for a reason. Now let's talk about a few more laws that are under this free speech platform, but more so how Indian society would react, rather than the state. India sometimes suspends internet access, as well as engages in internet censorship. Its justification for this is that communal incidents just don't spin out of control, and it gives time for police forces to control riots. Now, in many cases, this is actually true. You could say that the state abuses this aspect, and maybe it does, but it is a fact that if the internet was not suspended, you'd probably see way worse riots in some of these areas when things flare up. Now let's combine this with laws around hate speech, offending religious sentiments, or India's closest equivalent to a blasphemy law, the SCST Act, where a person from a historically disadvantaged untouchable caste or tribal group could automatically send you to jail off of a mere accusation of discriminating against them. This act is abused constantly in India today. Now, while previously this act was intended to protect some of these historically disadvantaged groups who still face disadvantages today, the severity and kind of frivolousness of this law causes it to be frequently abused today. This law may be India's single most biggest affront to free speech. And curiously, India's left is pretty approving of this. But again, I'm not going to get too political in this. But anyways, every single one of these laws would be scrapped. How would society react? Well, a lot of Indian society would go crazy. They'd be at each other's throats. There would be a massive amount of violence between communities. India already has to deal with something called Sartan Se Juda. Now, I don't want to get too much in trouble here, but basically this phrase is a call to violence onto those who have done perceived insults onto the Prophet Muhammad. Many have already died to this phrase, as well as other cases of offended sentiments. And this does occur across communities, but some do it more than others. I'm not going to single them out. Hindu-Muslim conflict would explode under these circumstances of free speech, as well as caste conflict and violence. And now throw in America's favorite Second Amendment, and you will see a huge amount of gun violence. Now, free speech is awesome in America, but to be honest, I don't know if it's for everyone. This isn't even singling out India at this point. Almost every country in the world does not have something like American free speech laws. It does have restrictions on speech. Free speech is an American value, probably one of its biggest values, if not biggest. Next, let's do another fun one, secularism. America has a very simple expression of secularism: separation between church and state. The American government is neutral towards religious groups and entities, and lets them operate as private entities. Public institutions don't really endorse or mandate any type of prayer or religious thing. Of course, there's going to be a Christmas tree at the White House, or some Hanukkah celebration at the library or something. There's no official mass patronage or favoritism between religions in America. India is very different. Theoretically, Indian secularism is supposed to have the government give equal treatment to all of India's diverse religious traditions. This should include stuff like equal patronage, equal legal treatment, equal restrictions or freedoms, etc. That sounds like secularism to you, right? It does to me too. But as time went on, or perhaps even since Indian independence, the government would practice a form of religious favoritism that would never fly in America. Take for example how Hindu temples, schools, and institutions are kept under the control or watch of the government. Minority institutions such as mosques, madrasas, convents, and churches are not. Money is extracted from Hindu temples, which generate massive amounts of private charity, and then used for the government to patronize other things or just as a source of revenue, many times patronizing minority institutions and in an outsized manner. I say outsized because this extraction process doesn't happen with mosques or churches, and Muslims and Christians have dedicated minority ministries for their concerns. Mosques and churches are private institutions. Hindu temples are public goods, or perhaps more accurately, a source of revenue for India's infamous government corruption. This doesn't sound like secularism in an American sense, or in any sense, actually. If American norms and law were applied here, the government would cease all patronage, all extraction, and all meddling in these religious affairs. And while the government does actually patronize Hindu institutions and temples to a degree, the net result of this Americanization of Indian secularism and law would be more freedom for Hindus and a lot of these privileges taken away from the minorities. Now, the last part of India's change in secularism would be equality before law, a universal or secular civil code, as recently proposed by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Wait, right-wing Hindu nationalist guy proposing secularism? This doesn't really make sense, right? But again, I'm not trying to get too political here. Anyways, Indian politics is very complex. You could watch my other videos and you'll learn a bit more about that. Let's leave that for another time and continue on. In India today, civil disputes for Muslims are taken under Muslim personal law. That is to say, India has separate legal codes for different religious people. In the past, we've actually seen reforms to these separate religious codes. But in general, this is a massive affront to the idea of secularism itself, and totally different from America's equality before law, one of its greatest aspects, where all citizens are treated equally and fairly and are not discriminated based on race, religion, or gender. So we're building up here, and this kind of brings us to our last section. Keep in mind, equality before law. Everyone should be treated equal. But there's a controversial aspect here, and even in America it was a bit controversial. We're going to talk about affirmative action or reservation in India. Now off the top, if we see American law applied in India, reservation is gone, as well as probably more crazily, caste-specific government policies, such as giving extra welfare benefits to certain castes, or affirmative action in lateral entry, or the promotion of jobs. This is all gone again under American equality before law. I've used this example before in my video about Jatitwa, but imagine if America had a law that mandated extra food stamps for Iranian Americans, or study abroad scholarships for Irish Americans. What if Egyptian Americans could send you to jail simply on an accusation that you said something racist to them? Again, these things are valid in India. They are the norm. But anyways, let's get back to affirmative action. Now, America actually previously did have affirmative action. That's why we're talking about it. This was mostly limited to public education, as well as in some government hiring. And there's also DEI, but that's in privately owned businesses, so let's keep that to the side. Affirmative action was there to correct historical injustices, such as slavery, as well as Jim Crow laws in the South, that caused a lot of African American groups to lag behind on various socioeconomic indicators. Affirmative action also helped certain groups that had representation that was kind of lagging, groups such as Hispanics or Native Americans. In some cases, there's affirmative action towards women as well. But in 2023, affirmative action was struck down by the US Supreme Court. While some institutions such as universities and obviously even some private businesses try to continue it in a subjective way, stuff like personality tests or maybe even essays or these small little subjective ways that they could kind of integrate DEI or affirmative action into their affairs. However, due to the Supreme Court judgment, we are increasingly seeing lawfare from the conservative side as they try to weed out any places that are still trying to continue it. This is in both public as well as private spaces. MIT's incoming class actually gives us a glimpse of this judgment's effect, as the African American percentage in their newest class drops from 15% last year to 5% this year. Hispanics dropped from 16% to 11%. And funnily enough, even the white percentage dropped by 1%, 38% to 37%, while Asian Americans saw a rise, 40% to 47%. We might start to see similar changes in other universities or other institutions, maybe even businesses, as we see this continuous lawfare as a result of the Supreme Court decision. But when it comes to India, reservation is firmly in place, already at the 50% limit for caste-based representation in central affairs. In some states, it goes as high as 69%. Recently, there have been calls to even break this limit for things like public employment and education, with some even more ominous calls to officially bake it into private employment. Now, you have to remember the percentage of the population that qualifies for reservation is probably around 50%, if not a little bit more. So this does not bode well for Indian meritocracy and their unreserved sections of society. I've talked about some of these dangers of a creeping reservation or even this kind of caste conflict within India in my videos on Jatitva or Million Minorities and many of my other videos. You could find them in the description below. My main point is, in an American style system, all these reservations are rendered null. This will indeed boost meritocracy in India, a complaint that I have heard from Indians who come abroad. And as we see in places like America and the UK, as well as Australia and various other places, Indians thrive when it comes to meritocracy. But one small caveat here is that since India's caste networks are still very, very strong, this could also mean a bit of nepotism starts to creep in from powerful castes, possibly similar to something like legacy admissions in the US. But either way, this isn't really a concrete idea. It is kind of a what if, and India will be way more meritocratic either way. Now keep in mind, meritocracy is good and everything, but in diverse societies, different sections want to see representation. They want to feel like they're part of this national movement or the society or state. They want to feel like they have a piece of the pie. What I'm getting at here is kind of what Lee Kuan Yew has talked about when it comes to socialism versus capitalism. While socialism will keep all of society poor, capitalism will have a lot of inequality. There are sections of the society who are going to succeed, but some are not. So you need to have kind of a mixed economy, being able to strike a right balance within the society, being able to make sure that resentment does not build up within a society. And sometimes a pure meritocracy can cause this. So a mixed system may be best for diverse societies like America and India. But anyways, I'll leave it to them. Now this idea about diversity, it's very important in terms of what we're talking about. Both America and India are some of the most diverse places on the planet. While American culture highlights the importance of racial differences, as well as an idea of immigration and a melting pot, India's diversity is perhaps more numerous and maybe a bit more fractal, as there's much more ethnic as well as linguistic and caste and all these different types of diversity within India. As a result, diversity is probably more important in India than it is in America, which leans more towards unity. If America is a melting pot, India is a thali, where each individual dish or community has its own space, has its own circle, interacts by itself. Sometimes it interacts with other sections, but it's separate, though on the same plate. So if we applied America's formula onto India, we'd see less importance on caste, language, religion, ethnicity, and various other aspects of India's infinite diversity. Americanization of India means homogenization. Unity wins out over diversity. And this is going to piss off a lot of Indians. We could also explore this aspect when it comes to federalism, but I don't really want to focus on the legal aspects. I want to talk about cultural regionalism. In America, people may say that they're a proud Texan or proud Californian, proud New Yorker, but this is nothing compared to the pride that Indians take in their regional states. The pride of a Bengali, a Tamil, a Punjabi is way more than a Wisconsin, a Marylander, or a Floridian. States may face off against the center in both countries, but in India, federalism gets supercharged with regionalism, as each state in India is linguistically or culturally different from the other. And this is sometimes where secessionism comes in, but at this point in India, it's pretty much done. Anyways, as you could kind of see, America is not for everyone, nor does it always live up to its values. Recently, we've seen the American government infringe on things like free speech or the freedom of the press. Now, I bring up the freedom of the press here, as in India, it's probably not as much as America as we traditionally think it's so. But again, recent examples within America are starting to blur that line. We saw during the 2020 elections, where censorship demands came from places like the FBI on stories like the Hunter Biden laptop story, or even CV-19. Recently, Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Meta, has come out in a letter accusing the Biden administration of pressure when it came to information around a recent viral disease. This relationship between government, big tech, and media is definitely a bit of a sore spot when it comes to the American values we've been discussing, or even things like Jan 6th and election denial. You could definitely say that these types of things were against the democratic ethos of America. The American media was understandably dead set against this type of rhetoric and actions when Trump and the Republicans did it. But when it came to India, the script flipped. In the run-up to the 2024 Lok Sabha elections, American media actually encouraged things like election denial. We've seen frequent calls for a non-democratic regime change within India, and this idea that India is a dictatorship or something, when in my opinion it's probably one of the most vibrant democracies on the planet, very close if not up there with the US. But anyways, as I was saying, American values are not universal. Saudi Arabia, China, France, Brazil, of course India, and every other country do not need to adhere to American values. While they work in America, they might not work in other places, and they shouldn't be imposed in the world. If people want to imbibe them, that's awesome. If they don't, that's cool too. Either way, my main idea is India would greatly change if it adopted American values. Some for the better, some for the worse, sometimes moving left, sometimes moving right. But either way, there'd be a really big shakeup. And keep in mind, India is going to interact with America a lot in the future. Not just on a political level, but also on a cultural level. India has the world's largest English-speaking population, and America holds one of the largest Indian diasporas, including me. But ultimately, I think India should chart its own destiny, its own path. For Indian people, know what's best for India. At least I hope so. Anyways, thanks for watching, everyone. Please like, share, subscribe, share. I already said share, but you guys kind of know the spiel at this point. This is Akshay from the Emissary. Have a good one.